Just don't get too far, and I'll be right.
Hi beautiful souls, it's Tan here today with another video on astrology for you. And today we're going to be looking at the vertex in astrology, what it means and how to work with it. So I'll be providing you with a short exercise to occupy your time in this quarantine phase of our lives. Before we get started, if you've been following the channel and you like the content that I've been putting out, you can support me on a platform called coffee.com by buying me a coffee. And the support that you provide me with will go into purchasing tools and equipments that I need to invest in order to make these YouTube videos for you guys, as well as doing birth chart readings. So before we get started, I'm going to provide you guys with a quick vocabulary list of important words that I'll be using in today's video for if you're sort of a beginner or a pre-intermediate level into astrology, just to kind of help you make sense of this video. So if I talk about degrees, a degrees is the specific numerical calculation of where the planets or a particular point is in the sky in a chart. So the degrees, you can see it being the number that appears next to the planets when you generate your natal chart. Orbs are the difference in degrees between planets, asteroids, and points. So for example, let's say you have your vertex at 5 degrees of Scorpio, and let's say that your sun is at 4 degrees of Scorpio. Your sun and your vertex are going to be in a conjunction, having a 1-degree orb. And orbs can occur when there's a conjunction to planets on top of each other, or it can occur when there's any aspects. The major aspects between planets and points that I'll be talking about in this particular video to take note of is going to be the square, opposition, and conjunction. So conjunctions happen when planets or points are going to be very close to each other. Now, squares and oppositions occurs between planets and points of the same modality. And squares are going to happen between planets and points that are, and by points or angles, I mean the ascendant, the midheaven, the IC, and the descendant. And points, we can talk about the north node. And asteroids that we'll be talking about in this video mainly will be Juno. So when you have squares, they're occurring between planets, angles, or points that are 90 degrees away from each other. Oppositions occur when there's going to be an 80 degrees or so orbs between planets, points, angles. And the signs of planets, angles, or points that can be squares or oppositions have to belong to the same modality. There are 3 modalities in astrology. The first modality is the cardinal modality. Planets, points, or angles in cardinal modalities are going to be in Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. These signs, if you have anything in these signs, it's going to either be conjunct, square, or opposite to each other. The next modality is the fixed modality. That is, if you have anything in the signs of Taurus, Scorpio, Aquarius, and Leo. These signs will, anything in these signs will either conjunct, square, or opposite, be opposite to each other. And the last modality is the mutable modality. That is between, if you have anything in your chart, in Gemini, Sagittarius, Pisces, or Virgo, these are mutable modalities. They will square or be opposed or conjunct to each other. Solar returns, that is going to be a theme of what's happening in your life from one birthday to the next birthday. So I'll provide a link in the description box below, as well as steps on how to generate a solar return chart to see the themes of one birthday to the next birthday for you. Yes, I think that's going to be the main words I'll be using in this video. So the vertex. The vertex in astrology, a lot of people will say that it is a point of fate. in my definition of fate, from what I've observed in my own life, coupled with theories as well as the lives of the people around me, fate to me seems like something that is not entirely out of our control. We do have some free will when it comes to fate, in a sense that at a particular period of your life, you're going to be growing in a particular way. And during that time of your life, if there's a person who has traits or qualities, or they bring opportunities that is in alignment with or corresponds to what you're trying to grow in that period of your life, you may feel drawn to that person, to have a relationship with them, or to have something to do with them, and it's going to feel fated because they're ultimately helping you on your journey in life. So that's how I've noticed that fate works with regards to the vertex point. So the vertex is a point where it's very unpredictable because it's fate. You can't predict fate according to the definition of fate that I've given earlier. So therefore, it's not going to provide a lot of accuracy if you're trying to predict something in the future. It can tell you a little bit about what can happen to you in terms of future predictions, but the vertex works best when you're tracing back a particular time in your life when maybe you and another person have met up and it feels fated, like you have something to do with each other. And when you're tracing this back, you can either trace it using your own natal chart, but it's most accurate if you can trace it with having the other person's natal chart as well. So there are going to be a couple of steps that you may want to look for to interpret your vertex. And I'm going to provide a step-by-step guide in the description box below as well on how to turn on the vertex in your natal chart using astro.com. So if you have your natal chart in front of you with the vertex point being turned on, the first thing you want to notice is what sign is your vertex in? What degrees is your vertex in? So the first thing that you can do, once you've noticed the sign and the degrees of your vertex, is to see if a particular person that you feel you have a fated encounter with, do they have any personal planets? So Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and sometimes Saturn. Or do they have their Juno or their north or south node, or their angles, ascendant, descendant, midheaven, or IC? Within a degrees, in a conjunction, square, or opposition, with regards to the modalities I mentioned earlier, to your natal vertex. And for these aspects, you have to keep the orbs very tight, meaning that the orbs have to be maximum 1.5 degrees orb. So for example, this person has their vertex at 24 degrees of Gemini, and let's say that they met with somebody who has their ascendant at 25 degrees of Gemini. This person's ascendant is going to be conjunct let's call our imaginary person Allison, because I really like Alison Sudol. You guys heard of a fine frenzy? I like her. So this means that the person with 25 degrees Gemini ascendant is going to have their ascendant conjunct Allison's vertex by a 1 degrees orb. That's close enough to be a conjunction. But this can be up to 1.5, meaning that the conjunction can be anything between 22.5 degrees of Gemini to 25.5 degrees of Gemini, and square, so that's going to be also Pisces and Virgo, or opposition, that's going to be Sagittarius. Any of these works. So that's going to be the first thing that you're going to be looking for to see if somebody, a particular person, when you meet with them, is going to feel fated. The next thing that we want to be looking for is, coupled with what we have earlier, an activation of your vertex on a full moon, new moon, or an eclipse in a particular year. So new moon is when the sun and the moon are in the same sign, in conjunction to each other. The full moon is when sun and moon are opposite to each other. So, for example, if Allison meets that particular person that we talked about earlier, when there is a Gemini new moon, and the Gemini new moon happens when, let's say, the new moon and the full moon are conjunct at 23 degrees Gemini. That's close enough to be conjunct, to have a new moon being conjunct to Allison's vertex. And this works even better if there's a double whammy of conjunction. So, or square or opposition, that can work too. But for new moon and full moon, I think it has the most power when it's in a conjunction. So let's say the Allison's fated encounter. Let's say that they have a vertex at 5 degrees of Scorpio. So let's say that that particular year there was a new moon on Allison's vertex, and then later in the year there was another new moon or full moon on, or maybe it's before then, the new moon or a full moon on Allison's fated encounter person's vertex. So it's a new moon in Scorpio or a full moon in Scorpio. Then we can see that that particular year Allison and her fated encounter person are having something to do with each other. Maybe they kind of meet on the first cycle, but they lose touch and then they get together on the next cycle. Or maybe they're only together for that particular cycle. We won't know, actually. The vertex is unpredictable in this sense, but this is how this pattern can show that there's something going on between these two people. So that's 2 steps. The next step you want to be looking at is you want to draw up a solar return chart for that particular year. So let's say Allison draws up her solar return chart, and in the solar return that year, she's got, let's say, a vertex at 5 degrees of Sagittarius. So this is going to show that for that particular year, Allison may run into people who are of a Sagittarian nature with planets, points, angles, conjunct her vertex, her solar return vertex, or they could be Gemini, Pisces, Virgo on that modality with that particular 5 degrees of Sagittarius. Conjunction, square, opposition. That is possible for that year. And she may bring in someone of that nature. They may come into her life. And so let's say that Allison's fated encounter earlier. Let's say that they have their sun. Yes, let's say they have their sun at about 6 degrees of Sagittarius. So that person then has sun at 6 degrees of Sagittarius. You know, they've got rising at 25 degrees of Gemini, and they've got their vertex at, what did I say earlier? 5 degrees of Scorpio. So we can see that this person, when you have a repeated theme like this is the person that Allison's definitely going to have something to do with in a particular year of her life. And so it's more prominent and it is more accurate if you can get a theme for all three steps. So your natal chart and someone's natal chart themes, the eclipses and the new moon, full moons, and a solar return. Having vertex activations for all three, that's a really sure sign that something's going on there with fated encounters. If you have one or the other, then we can assume that something may happen, but it's not very clear. We probably may not want to take it to 100% surety. So I think that's all I have for today, guys. Comment below if you found this exercise useful, if you've tried it, traced back some of your encounters and had anything shown up for you. If you still have any questions, then leave them in the comments below and I will try to get to it. And if you like this video, then give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button below if you haven't. If you already subscribed, then thank you very much for coming along. I do birth chart readings, synastry, relationship readings. All the information is on my website. You can check that out. And yeah, I'll see you very soon, beautiful souls. Bye.
I just want us to